911 operators, what call scares you till this day? Not safe for work. Posted 1 day ago. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I shadowed a 911 operator. We got a call from an 8-year-old who said his big brother was in the bathroom and hasn't been out for an hour and there was no sound. He broke the door open somehow while he was on the phone with us, and his brother was dead from suicide, hanging. This was a small town, and a year prior that same older brother had called in when the mom had committed suicide herself on pills. Hearing that kid cry will always haunt me. I decided not to become a 911 operator. Didn't really scare me, but touched me deeply. Lady calls in. She stopped to visit elderly couple she knew because she had not heard from them. The elderly man had dementia. Apparently his wife died in her sleep days before, and he didn't realize and had been getting in bed with her nightly. I'm going to do another one because this thread is a bummer and we all need a laugh. I assure you, not making any of this up. There was a ranch on the edge of the city limits in my area, right by a large park and swimming hole. That ranch had a variety of livestock, but they had an issue with their pygmy goats. Every few weeks, we'd get a call because 100 little goats were roving through the park or down the street. One day, I took that call from a man in the park who had been chased by the goats into a porta potty. He was frantic, like screaming, "You need to send the damn animal control out here right now." And all the while, I could hear 2 other prominent repeated sounds, the whack of little goat noggins rattling against the plastic porta potty and bleeding. Malevolent, incessant bleeding. What did those goats want? What would they have done had he not found refuge? We'll never know. Not one specific call, but suicide calls where the caller has no interest in seeking help, but just wanting the police to find them before their family does. Knowing you're likely the last person to speak to someone and there's nothing you can do to help is pretty rough. Not scared, just kinda haunted. This past Mother's Day, I had a teenage boy calling because he found his mother overdosed and dead. The sobbing as he called out, "Mom, Mom," still makes me tear up. Family member worked as a police dispatcher, received a call from an elderly woman. Her husband had just been killed in their garage by an intruder. She heard it happening. She's wheelchair bound, but phone was next to her. She frantically begged my family member to help her. While he was on the phone with her, the criminal cut her throat. My family member stays on the line 3 more minutes until the cops got there. He could hear the sounds of the attack, her gasping and gurgling noises. He kept telling her help was coming and to hold on. Amazingly, she survived. Criminal was later caught. A 17-year-old who just wanted the thrill of killing someone and picked them at random. He's on death row now. Good. I wasn't, but my dad's longtime girlfriend was a 911 operator. She was an absolute angel on earth, but she had the most heartbreaking stories. Worst I can think of was an older woman who called 911 because her husband had locked himself in their bedroom and refused to come out despite her begging and pleading. The lady exclaimed, "He's in there and he has a gun, please hurry." While the operator was trying to keep her calm and talk her down, she heard the unmistakable pop of a gun. I can't imagine the wailing on the other end of the phone after that poor lady had to listen to her husband committing suicide through the door. We'll let you walk them through the CPR process if they don't know it, some won't. Every one of them, you hear the caller at some point pleading with the patient to not leave them. Most times they do though. Parents, spouses, children, I've had them all call. Never gets easier. I was a 911 operator. When I asked for the address, I get an angry man yelling, "Just get the fucking ambulance here." When I asked what happened, the caller said, "You don't need to fucking know that." "I just need to know what happened so I know who to send and what equipment to bring, sir." "Just send a goddamn ambulance. My kid's having a seizure. Don't send any fucking police." Don't send police coming from a caller is basically them telling on themselves. Please send police because the patient or the EMS crew or both could be in danger. So I passed the note to my partner who was dispatching. Send PD. Extremely uncooperative caller. I tried my best to get through the rest of the questions. How old is the kid? Are they conscious? Are they breathing? Has the seizing stopped, etc.? I got nothing but verbal abuse. All I knew is that a pediatric patient had a seizure when the call started. There was yelling in the background, and there was some terrible yelling in the foreground. "Put your hands up!" "Hey, what the fuck, bitch?" And that was it. Police had the caller. The patient ended up being a toddler who had been beaten to within an inch of their life by that asshole. That was terrifying and sad, and I hugged my own kid a little tighter that night. Former law enforcement officer. Had a dispatcher that needed some therapy after this one. Rural county sheriff's office is where we worked. Dead of winter. Roads were slick with a glaze of ice on top of the driven-on hard-packed snow. A rural mail carrier had lost control of her vehicle and rolled her Jeep Grand Cherokee on its top. Due to her delivering mail, her window was open, and during the crash, the vehicle had rolled on top of her arm. She was pinned, but managed to call 911. While en route, we could hear the panic in our dispatcher's voice when she said the vehicle had caught fire. On a summer day, it would have taken us about 15 minutes running lights and sirens. Due to road conditions, it took about 30. Every time my dispatcher keyed up on the mic to give us further information, I could hear the screams from the caller. By the time we got there, she had expired. Our dispatcher listened and tried to talk to this woman while she was burning alive. She was absent for like a month while she got everything sorted out. I think of both of them often. I have two. 1. A call from a male who stated he'd found his girlfriend's son unresponsive, very frantic caller. He and the mother passed the phone back and forth multiple times while I tried to give various rescue instructions. That part wasn't all that abnormal, but they later took the male into custody, and I found out the initial caller had strangled the kid and then freaked out and called. Still makes me mad, and it's been years. 2. Not mine, but a call they played for us in state training. An elderly man had a complete psychotic break and killed his wife with a hammer. Afterward, he calmly called 911 and confessed. The dispatcher attempted to give rescue instructions up until he realized the damage was extensive enough that her head was mostly gone. Several of the first officers on scene were violently ill because of how bloody the house was. Alarm operator dispatch that calls 911 for the client. I was working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, and a talkback call dropped to my phone and a computer system. The talkback allows us to communicate as if we're on the phone from wherever in the house they are. Real time, no delay, like a landline. A Detroit call, so it may have been 10 p.m. their time. An elderly man calls on the talkback system because his grandson is beating the door down to enter his premises. The grandson has restraining order, previous attempt, and so on. I masked the dispatch 911 while having him hold on the line. Hold time. Yes, hold time for 911 was around 55 minutes. With the client on one ear, the hold line for PD, the talkback system recorded the last 46 minutes of this man's life as his grandson entered the house and proceeded to beat him to death. Real time. On my talkback line. PD answered 25 minutes later. Nearly 30 years ago, my grandma was a widow living in a Florida retirement community. The landlords allowed a man in his early 40s to live in the community despite strict rules regarding age minimums. He ended up going on a drug-induced rampage, stabbing his son and girlfriend. My grandma was getting her mail, and he chased her all the way back to her doorstep and stabbed her over and over. She managed to crawl back into the house and call 911. We listened to the call during the trial, and it was absolutely one of the hardest things I've ever had to sit through. You could hear the man screaming outside the house. The 911 operator was very calm and trying to keep my grandma alive till help arrived. The guy took off in a stolen car and headed towards Georgia, going the wrong way on the highway. My grandma was airlifted to the nearest hospital and barely survived the attack. 370 stitches, including on both sides of her throat and all over her head. I firmly believe the calming, caring urgency from the dispatcher kept her going. Apartment fire. Woman burned alive on her balcony because she was too afraid to jump. The screams over the radio of the fire crews trying to rescue her. 20 minutes later, we get a call for a young man that walked in front of a dump truck on a highway to take his own life. While crews were responding to that, a 10-year-old girl who hung herself was found by her mother. I was still quite new the day all this happened, but I will never forget what I heard that day. 10. Got a 911 call with just screaming. Nothing intelligible, just the loudest screaming you've ever heard. I started officers to the house. Then a kid starts yelling that her uncle was trying to kill her, her sister, and her grandmother. She started screaming again. There was a thud, and then no more sound. Officers got there, and a man walked out into the driveway and said, "I did it. I killed them. He was mentally ill and lived with his mother. She had been trying to get him committed, with doctors saying he wasn't a danger to himself or others. His 9-year-old twin nieces were visiting from out of state. He snapped that morning, bludgeoned them all with blunt objects, including a large vise. His mom and one niece died. One twin survived with extensive injuries. It was a horrifying call. I work for the equivalent here in the UK. Not my call, one from a training session we had going. An elderly gentleman had called 999 as he was feeling faint, tight chest, and struggling to breathe. He wasn't in the house on his own. His son was downstairs, but he wanted to call in private due to his son being a worrier. He collapsed mid-call. The operator frantically dispatched somebody to go round and help. However, in the process of this, the sound that man was making were horrific, almost like a squeal, then turning into a grunting, high-pitched groan. I genuinely can't explain it. He sadly passed away by the time the crew had arrived, down to a massive heart attack. His son didn't even know what was happening until the police and paramedics turned up. Safe to say the son was devastated, and hearing him scream was just as bad. His son sadly killed himself a month later. Not scary, but will definitely stick with me for the rest of my life. Answered a 911 call about an unresponsive male driver passed out at a stop sign. I got the info and dispatched units to the scene. Realized moments later that the vehicle the caller described was my own. It was my 26-year-old SO who had overdosed on heroin and Xanax. He was at a road literally 100 feet from dispatch and EMS. We made it there at the same time. Narcan saved his life. He's currently in rehab for the next year and is rocking it. This was 10 plus years ago, but one night I had a call from a woman who jumped out of a moving vehicle to escape a sex assault. Suspect was an ex-boyfriend who had done it in the past. Luckily, she was still able to run, but she was definitely injured and had no idea where she was, and this was when a cell phone's location was just the closest cell tower. She was understandably hysterical, and I spent the first few minutes trying to get her calm and quiet enough to avoid detection. She found one of those big green electrical boxes to hide behind for a few minutes while the suspect drove back and forth looking for her. Once she couldn't see the headlights anymore, she was able to coherently speak to me, and we determined she was in an office park. There were building numbers, but she wasn't near a street sign, so that wasn't very helpful. I told her to check the nearest mailbox and to read me the address on any mail that she could find. It took her a minute or two of running behind buildings to locate a mailbox, but when she did, we were able to pinpoint her location. Half of the deputies in my county responded, and the happy ending to the story is that the suspect was still in the office park, and when he tried to flee on foot, Chewy caught up to him and made the arrest. Oh, Chewy was a 120-pound German Shepherd who served a long and distinguished career at my agency. This wasn't a call that necessarily keeps me up at night, but it was the scariest in-the-moment call I ever took. Former 999 call taker here. One call that stayed with me was from a woman whose daughter was choking on pizza. She had the phone on speaker, which was needed because just after giving the address, the caller just started screaming. The most hair-raising screaming I'd ever heard. Then she started screaming, "She's dead, she's dead, she's dead," over and over again. Her husband was following my instructions in the background, no idea how he could hear me over her screaming. The crew got there quickly, but the patient didn't make it. Just by typing this out, I can hear her screaming again. I was a 911 operator. I get a call one night of a woman crying. Not abnormal. People don't tend to call 911 on good days. She's crying, but trying to hold it together. Her son fell in the bathroom and isn't responding to her. She can crack open the door a little, but can't open it because he has fallen against the door, and the bathroom is small. She can see in a little bit. Her grown-up son is living with her. He went into the bathroom to do some drugs. I don't know what kind, but it was the kind you inject with a needle. We know this because she can see the needle hanging from his arm. I asked if this had ever happened before, and she said yes. She gave me his age, mid-20s, and her address and some other things I needed. While I'm talking to her, I can hear in every word this woman speaks the tremendous love and fear of a mother for her child. Her son is dying or is dead, and she knows it, but she can't do anything but stay as calm as possible to answer my questions. She was holding on, but I could hear it in her voice. He was in his 20s, but it was her baby dying on that floor, and she couldn't do a thing about it. That was about 8 years ago. I still feel upset when I think about that call even now. Rescue got there and he did live, but that doesn't change how I remember feeling. That poor mother.